Hello everyone, my name's Skylar, and one of my most adored game franchises of all time has got to be Capcom's classic, Resident Evil. This collection of games had so much heart and soul, it's unreal, so I'd love the opportunity to gush about what exactly made the classics so wonderfully special. But I myself don't think I could do Resident Evil justice alone, so I sought out the help of a ShadowLeggy, whose videos inspired me to get into the series to begin with. Say hello, ShadowLeggy.
Hey there, I'm known as ShadowLeggy, and I've been making Resident Evil themed animations for over 10 years now, and I'm gonna be gushing with the Happy Fun Time channel.
Hell yeah you are! I'm so incredibly excited to have you along for the video, Leggy. Let's gush. The feeling of looming despair always seemed to hang quietly in the classics. Settings were always dark and grim, long corridors were unsettling and foreboding, and the open environments left you feeling incredibly small and alone. You'd fear that you might not make it back to the save room from your adventures, whether it was from a sudden Crimson Head zombie attack, never before seen menacing creatures, or a surprise boss fight. Everything was perfectly set up to be incredibly hopeless as you explored and made in-the-moment panic choices, as opposed to the more in-your-face look at me, I'm scary kind of horror. It's really the dark subtleties tied with the overwhelming threat of defeat that kept you wondering if survival was even an option at all.
While it coined the term survival horror, I always felt Resident Evil had more of a tense and foreboding atmosphere. Horror imagery was subtle at best, tucked away in the background as unsettling details. The camera angles themselves would create an anxious feeling, leaving you to wonder what could be lurking around a corridor, what kind of trap is looming ahead, waiting for you to wander into. Some areas simply look normal. Too normal. Only adding an uncanny sense of dread. Though the original Resident Evil has some of the most ridiculous voice acting, the characters themselves are still very likable and endearing. Unlike the modern installments, memorable is probably the best way to describe them. I'd even argue that Resident Evil 2 has a group of some of the most likable and interesting characters in the entire franchise, with the overlapping stories and various different relationships they all have with one another.
All the characters are incredibly cheesy in the classics, whether it was from poor translation or just silly voice acting. What most likely would sell you on a character is indeed the near cringy remarks and poor dialogue. They were mostly all incredibly lame, but it was the best friend kind of lame. It made it special. And in my opinion, nobody likes classic Resident Evils because of the characters being relatable and serious. The overall goofy, lovable nature juxtaposed the dreary settings in that obscure sweet spot so perfectly. It's witnessing these odd concepts mesh that really does just make you want to smile. And in my book, that's perfectly fine.
Many people don't seem to realize that in the beginning, Resident Evil did indeed have a consistent plot and certain themes that were prevalent throughout the story. With the original game setting the stage, the main drive behind the series was to reunite with allies in order to take down Umbrella once and for all. Each game felt closer and closer to achieving this satisfying conclusion, but unfortunately things got a little too crazy somewhere in the middle of it all. Okay, let's be real here. It was Resident Evil 4's fault that things got stupid.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt about that at all. Resident Evil 4 is definitely the Resident Evil 7 to Resident Evil. Yeah. Though the classic story was a touch convoluted in my opinion, investigating the files and noticing certain details around your environments added an overarching story to everything, besides the mission to escape from the enclosure or defeat an enemy that's been following your every footstep. Through careful investigation, you yourself could piece together how the story all connected. It all felt like this odd mystery as you'd figure out how all these monsters, zombies, and other horrors came to be in the first place. The tank controls for the older games works perfectly and as intended for a couple of reasons. One, the world, environmental settings, and enemy placement are specifically designed with the controls in mind. Only being able to move in certain directions at once pushed the sense of unease and conveyed that awful feeling of what am I gonna do when running into something unexpected? This actually could emulate the sense of your character being afraid in a way, as you yourself would feel panicked or trapped, scared for the reasons intended. Every tense situation you come across could easily be solved by one of the following options. Fight or flight? Can I stand my ground to take out the enemy, or should I run for dear life to escape entirely, or to find a new tactical location to approach from?
There are a lot of people who will trash talk tank controls, but honestly, tank controls and fixed camera angles go together perfectly. Personally, when I've tried analog control, my character ends up veering in a totally wrong direction every time the angle changes. It's a total mess. Meanwhile, tank controls feel perfectly natural after trying them out for just a few minutes. Unless I'm in a blind panic of my own doing, never do I feel the game is out of my control, as others seem to claim. Item management is one of the key elements to making these games so tense. You wonder what kind of challenges will be coming up next, and how exactly should you prepare for them? How much space will I need? Should I bring more ammo? Will I get injured? When going in blind, it's a lot of risk and reward, but feels fulfilling when you manage to pull off a section just right.
The great thing about fixed camera angles is that it added that wondrous feeling of what could be lurking in the unseen. Even if your character was looking straight down a hall, you could never know what lies ahead until you plunge forward bravely, gun in hand and ready to fight. In a sense, many of these specific encounters would act similar to a jump scare, only executed in a much more subtle fashion as you turn around a corner only to see a stationary zombie menacingly standing there. Exploring around every corner could have been a death wish within itself, and every step into a hallway could mean the very end for everything you've achieved thus far. It's perfect.
Resident Evil used to be the franchise everybody wanted to be. Countless other games tried to emulate the style, the most notable being Silent Hill, which still managed to form its own identity. But nowadays, it's Resident Evil that's trying to capitalize on all the latest trends and popular games. It's a sad turn of affairs, but we can only hope that the Resident Evil 2 remake will harken back to its true roots and follow the path of the original remake, arguably one of the best games in the entire franchise.
It's definitely fine to try and innovate and reinvent a genre, but to stray this far away from its source material to pander to a newer style of horror just might leave you wondering if what's coming out is even Resident Evil at all. Sure, anyone can enjoy the newer styles of Resident Evil, and perhaps one can even prefer what the franchise has become, but it's always important to remember its roots, and appreciate what the classics had to offer. I mean, they're classics for a reason. There's gotta be something there. So if you're a newer fan of the Resident Evil franchise, do yourself a massive favor and give the classics a go. You can get the remake of the original Resident Evil for pretty cheap on most platforms, but if you do decide to take a whack at it, don't cheat yourself out of a great survival horror experience. Use the tank controls, because it's just not Resident Evil without tank controls. Well, that's just gonna about do it for this video. I hope the viewers have learned a thing or two about what made the classics great, and I hope that we've also appeased the die-hard Resident Evil fans as well. If you think we've missed some crucial points, or you want to chat about what you think makes Resident Evil great, feel free to comment below. I'd love to stir up some discussion with you. Anyway, a huge thank you to the fantastic ShadowLeggy. It means so much that I could work on this with you, and it's been an incredible pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I always love talking about the older Resident Evil games and just what they mean to me. So, hopefully, these will get the younger generations to consider playing the classic Resident Evil games, because they really aren't bad at all. So on that note, thank you again for having me, and bye everybody!
Bye, Leggy! If you want to check out some of ShadowLeggy's work, I've linked some of my personal favorite videos from her. They're very fun and enjoyable, so definitely check them out. Also, if you want to hear me gush about the controls and game feel of the upcoming ukulele game, click right on over here. I promise you it's not as good. Please watch it.